Hi, good evening, Singapore. I wonder if all of you can hear me well. This is Lim Tean after work on Wednesday, the 23rd of September at 5:30 p.m. Very happy to be with all of you. We will just give a few minutes for people to settle in. So how's your day been? I'm sorry I didn't manage to do a show last week. It was so hectic, and but I thought, in the last 2 weeks, so many things have built up, and we need to have a discussion about it. And I'm just, delighted to be with you today. Now, I'm going to talk about two main topics today. The first is the reform of our justice system, and on that, I'm going to concentrate mainly on the reform of the criminal justice system. And secondly, I am going to talk about this huge uproar which exploded 2 days ago, and on which I made a post, the Amit Verma case. All right. And I have certain comments because I did a post which basically went viral. All right. I had, I think, like 1,500 reactions to it, 600 to 700 shares, So people are interested in this topic. And of course, I've had my detractors. I've had a lot of people who have complained about my post, which I shall come to. But I think it is important for us to discuss that. Let me first come to the reform of the criminal justice system. And I have thought it appropriate to bring this topic up for discussion at this time because of some very important developments recently. And of course, in the last few weeks, we have all been consumed with the Pati Liani case, this Indonesian domestic maid who was wrongly accused and then convicted of theft. All right? And so lucky for her, she had wonderful support from home, HOME, and from her lawyer, Anil Balchandani, who fought tooth and nail for her all the way from trial right up to the appeal stage, and eventually secured her acquittal before Justice Chan Seng On. And I must say again, what a wonderful judgment Justice Chan handed down, 100 pages of that, which I have gone through it now exhaustively. And wonderful. And also very interesting to note today that she has filed, Pati Liani has filed for disciplinary proceedings against the public prosecutors, two of them, who were the people who prosecuted her in court. All right, the public prosecutors. So we will see. I mean, it's I wouldn't go beyond that because I do not want to prejudge things. I do not want to be in contempt of court. Safe to say that there are now proceedings in court instituted by her. And there could be a myriad of other consequences arising from this, So we will see. I'm going to leave it at that. But ladies and gentlemen, if you look at social media and what has been going on in the last few weeks arising from the Pati Liani case, you will see that a lot of people have said, look here, how could such a gross injustice have happened in our country? And if you troll through the evidence, actually, it is terrible. It is just absurd how you could have, the police issuing a warrant of arrest almost instantly, just based on the complainant's report, right? Mr. Liu Man Leong and son went to make a police report. Based on that, the warrant of arrest was issued, without even Pati Liani being interrogated. And then, you know what? The police didn't go to the scene of the crime, the alleged crime, until 5 weeks later, until Pati Liani had come back to Singapore, seeking alternative employment. So they went to the scene of the crime, alleged crime, 5 weeks later, And then you know what? They then went through the alleged stuff which was supposed to be stolen. I don't even know how it was stolen because the staff didn't even leave the employer's house in the first place. All right? So, and then they didn't even seal the items. They allowed the Lius to keep using the items. And on the witness stand, when questioned, the investigating officer said, "Oh, I didn't want to re-victimize the family members." That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous answer. And it was no wonder that Justice Chan Seng On found that there was a break in the causation, and there can't be theft. Because how can you ascertain with certainty whether something in the box, all right, was not put in there by other family members and was not put in there by Party Liani herself, all right? And the items were not eventually sealed until I think it was 1.5 years later. It was in April of the following year, that, and very shortly before trial, all right, a few weeks before trial, that the items were eventually sealed. So there is much to be desired in the way the police carried out the entire investigation. Now, I am not going to go so much into the police case or what wrongs the police did, all right? I think the chief of police will have to make a thorough review. The Ministry of Law will have to come in to make a thorough review of police procedures, what went wrong, okay? Except to say, I will say this, it is very unusual for police officers to issue a warrant of arrest just based on a complainant's report without first interrogating the accused. What I want to touch on more today is more on how I think our prosecutorial system can be improved. You know, a lot of complaints have also been leveled against the public prosecutors. Now, the public prosecutors are the ones who, having received evidence from the police, must then go through the evidence and be satisfied that there is good evidence on which, you know, this person should be charged, and they must be confident that the evidence is sufficient for there to be a conviction at the end of the day in court. Yeah. And so that is the legal aspect of it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is where my whole quarrel with our current system is. You know, in Singapore, the prosecution system is such that everything lies with the Attorney General's chambers, the AGC for short. Now, the Attorney General is not a member of Parliament, all right? But the AGC is the chief legal advisor to the government. Basically, the AGC only has one client, the government. And so you have this very close nexus between the AGC and the government. And you know, when you bring a prosecution, you bring it in the name of the state, all right? In Singapore, it is titled PP versus someone. So the public prosecutor versus someone. The public prosecutor is supposed to represent the state. But the prosecution is brought by the AGC, who also happens to be the chief legal advisor of the government. Whenever you sue a statutory board, whenever you sue any ministry, any government officials, it will be the AGC who steps in to defend that government entity. All right? So you have this very, very close nexus again between the government and the AGC. And so we have to ask ourselves, we may like to think that the AGC is independent, Yeah. Or in theory, that is what is supposed to happen. But you do not give people the perception of independence, do you? Because of your close nexus with the government. And so many people complain. All right, where is the independence in the prosecution at the end of the day? You know? Let's do not forget, the Attorney General, as the highest government legal officer, has tremendous discretion, tremendous authority in who he or she decides to prosecute. And all the deputy public prosecutors underneath him, they basically are below him. Yes, in most cases, he will not take a direct interest in the prosecution, but ultimately, he is responsible for the prosecution of every single person who is prosecuted in our courts. All right? So again, I ask, where is this transparency and this absolute independence which we should see in our system? You compare this to two jurisdictions which I am going to bring up as an example. In England, they have an independent body known as the Crown Prosecution Service, all right, the CPS. Now, in the old days, England had the same system as we do now. The Attorney General and the ministry he worked on, or the department he was in control of, was in charge of state prosecutions. But eventually the system changed in, I believe, in the 80s. When I was a student in England, I think the system changed then. And they then instituted a new system, and they introduced this body called the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. The Crown Prosecution Service is totally independent. It reports to no one. It does not report to government at all. Yeah? Nominally, in England, the Attorney General still is the supervising body for the CPS. But he has no say in who gets prosecuted, except in very few instances. For example, if it concerns national security, then he has a say. And then in a few other offenses, it is what we call the Attorney General's fiat. You are only allowed to bring certain prosecutions with the authority and consent of the Attorney General. But other than that, the CPS is a totally independent body which advises the police and other investigative bodies, and it makes an independent decision when it receives the evidence whether a certain person should be prosecuted or not. Yeah? So you have independence there. Now you go to the case of Australia. Australia has an even more remarkable system, because in Australia, when the state prosecutes, and there they prosecute in the name of the crown, because the Queen is still the symbolic head of state, all right? Australia is not a republic yet. The Queen is still the head of state. The Queen of England is still the head of state. This is their colonial past. And so prosecutions have to be brought in her name. But when the Crown prosecutes, it is done through an independent body. And you know what? In Australia, they do not even have government-funded servants. Not like our AGC, funded by the government. They do not even have government-funded prosecutors. Their prosecution are fielded out mostly to private practitioners. They can be Queen's Counsel, Senior Counsel who prosecute. And those people, in their private practice, also do defense work. So they are not just prosecutors. They don't just prosecute their entire career. which is what the AGC does, right? The AGC only prosecutes. The only time it defends is when it defends government or it defends government bodies. And so you then have lawyers who understand the mechanics of prosecution, but who also understand what it is like to be on the other side, what it is like to be a defendant. And I think that is important. I think that is important. One criticism I have of our system is that you do not have prosecutors who have been on. Hi, Singapore. I'm so sorry for that interference again. I don't understand why. Every time I speak or I'm doing live stream, this thing happens. Yeah? But I hope you can hear me clearly now. And let me continue where I left off. Is that, you know, we must have a system where prosecutors are not out to just secure a conviction at all costs, which appeared to be the case in the Party Liani case. All right? You know, when a state prosecutes someone, it mustn't be the case that the state wants to win at all costs. At the end of the day, justice must be done. And even if the accused is acquitted, that is in the interest of justice. A lot of complaints have been made over the decades that in our system, the prosecution wants to win at all costs. That the system is very heavily stacked against the defendant. And I think that is something which we must change. We must change in order to be a truly first world nation, a truly civilized society in which the rights and liberties of individuals are respected. It cannot be that we tip the scale so heavily in favor of the state all the time. And in this regard, let me tell you this. You may have read in the last 2 days, a huge uproar has occurred in this Syed Suhail case, all right? This is a prisoner on death row. And the formidable M. Ravi has done a fantastic job in staving off his execution, which was scheduled for last Friday. All right, and the matter is now still before the Court of Appeal, as I understand it. I'm not the lawyer handling it, so, you know, I am just telling you based on what I have heard and what I understand, all right? So correct me if I'm wrong. But you know what has happened in a lot of, in that case? It's incredible. You know, in law, one of the most sacrosanct privileges a client has is the correspondence and the communications between the client and the lawyer. It is what we call legal professional privilege. Legal professional privilege is so sacrosanct. You cannot break it. No judge can ask to see the correspondence between a client and his lawyer. All right? And if I am a lawyer and I break that privilege, disciplinary proceedings can be brought against me. I can be disbarred. All right? And even if I am the opposing lawyer, I cannot make use of this without prejudice communication. I cannot use it. And if I come into possession of it, I must discard it, I must return it, and I must not read it. All right? That is how seriously the law treats communication between client and lawyer. And you know what happened? The prison service, all right? Our prison service was giving communication between prisoners and their lawyers to the AGC. Can you believe this? from the prison service, who should know the law better than, what they have been practicing. I'm telling you, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. All right? And rightfully, the matter is before the courts. Because let's respect the rights of every person. Even people whom we suspect of drug offenses or other offenses. People are entitled to confidence with their lawyer. We can't have a system like that, my friends. We can't have a system that is so tilted in favor of the state. And I am glad that this matter is now before the courts, and I look forward to a definitive ruling from the Court of Appeal on issues like that, which I think are so fundamental. So we must start balancing the scales of justice. Yeah. And that brings me to the third point, which is how we recruit our judges. And again, the district judge in the Party Liani case has come in for a lot of criticism. All right, shortly after the Party Liani case was concluded, she was transferred to the AGC. Yeah. And my friends, over the years, this has been the pattern. People from the AGC have been transferred to serve as district judges. People from the AGC have been transferred to serve in the High Court. Many of our High Court judges have been former attorney generals and so forth. I am not saying that an attorney general should not eventually become a High Court judge or even become the Chief Justice. In other Commonwealth jurisdictions, there has been precedence for it. In fact, it is quite a common occurrence. But I think there should not be such a frequent interplay between the AGC and our state courts, certainly. Yeah. Because, I think there should be this separation. Because it is only human nature, after a while, when you have worked in the AGC. All right, I'm saying it is human nature. I'm not criticizing our judges. I'm not criticizing our courts. I'm not saying that they are biased or whatever. Yeah. You become almost familiar. This is institutional familiarization. And then what is unlawful actually, can actually pass muster. You can actually overlook things because you think to yourself, that is how the police work, that is how the prosecution works, all right? And I think there is that danger. There is that danger. And I can't tell you now, but I know when I started practicing in the 90s, in the early 90s, the quality of the judges in the state courts, in my humble opinion, in those days, was not good. I think the quality has improved tremendously. But we have this problem in Singapore, my friends, where amongst our lowest grade judicial officers, the assistant registrars in the courts, all right? In our system of justice, if you go to the High Court, you find that your proceedings are most likely to be heard by the assistant registrar at the first stage. And after they make a decision, if you're not satisfied with it, you appeal to a High Court judge. And if you are still not happy with the High Court judge's appeal, you can, in some instances now, appeal to the Court of Appeal, provided, there are some cases where you need the leave of the court to appeal to the Court of Appeal. So you can see from there that even the assistant registrars, the lowest rung, play a very important part in decision making. I believe it is still the case. The assistant registrars almost come straight out of law school. Very few of them actually have any practical experience of practice. Yeah. And I think that's not right. I think you should, even at your lowest rung, you should have people who are experienced in practice, who have known life a bit. Yeah. Because the law is not always black and white. Okay. It is not always black and white. There is a lot of discretion involved in the application of the law. You know, there was a very famous American Supreme Court judge by the name of Oliver Wendell Holmes. And one of his most famous sayings was this: experience is the lifeline of the law. Because when you make decisions, all right, it is, you are not just basing it on what is the statute. Yes, you are applying the statute, you are applying the law. Yeah? But it is the experience. What is society experiencing at that moment? Or what has life, you know, what is the experience of life that comes into play when you apply the law? All right, so that is important. And you cannot expect that fresh graduate out of university, yeah, I don't care, he may have a first class from Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, you know, NUS, all right? There is no substitute for that experience. You know, when I was first called to the bar, the Singapore bar in 1991, in England in those days, for you to even qualify as the lowest rung judicial officer, what they call the master, all right, which is the equivalent of our registrars in our courts, you needed to have at least 10 years experience as a barrister. That means in practice. So that is what other jurisdictions make their people go through. You must have experience of practice before you sit in judgment. I'm afraid we still don't have that in Singapore. Yeah? And I think that must change. And I dare say, if, you know, we change that, all right, we will have more satisfactory judgments than what we had in the Patti Liani case at first instance, when she was convicted by the district court. Now, finally, on this point, before I move on to my next topic, you know, was it 2 days ago, the very respected historian and commentator P.J. Tam was hauled up by the police for questioning. I think he went to the police station for interrogation on the 20th of September over a police report that the election department had filed on the 18th of September. 18th of September. So 2 days later, they hauled him up, or they called him up for interrogation. Supposedly over some unlawful activities conducted during the election period, over some what they allege as advertising, but from other sources I've read it was simply the boosting of a post and of a video which had been made even before the election period. Now, again, I do not think that is correct. I think that is harassment. All right? I do not think that we should have a system where the police just jumps onto something filed by the election department that is under the Prime Minister's office to investigate someone. Okay? That is not right. 2 days after the report is made, person is hauled up. So I can understand the criticisms leveled. I understand that the SDP has criticized the move. Yes. And to me, that is harassment. That is harassment. Yeah, because that is an attempt to induce fear in civil society, civil activists, telling them that, look here, the law is going to be on you at all times. And yet, when we have other election, breaches, all right, the police never holds the person up. Like we know, during the election period, Ong Yi Kang made this video showing him and I think a young boy, all right, okay, and he wasn't hauled up for questioning. Nothing happened. But oh yes, the matter is different if it is PJ Thum, all right, and I'm sure if it is with Lim Tean as well, and with any of the opposition, yes. So I leave you to make your own judgment, my friends. I now want to move on to my next topic, which is this incendiary post made by this person who went by the name of Amit Verma, all right, 2 days ago. I saw the post very late at night, close to midnight, and it incensed me. He called Singaporeans. He was saying, you Singaporeans are racist. All right, you question our visas and things like that. You people are xenophobic. He used those words. All right. He called us a racist. He said we were xenophobic. And then he deliberately desecrated our country's name. He spelled it as Singapore. Singapoo. Poo, yeah? Not Singapore, Singapore. And this was deliberate. I say with no hesitation. All right? And I called him out. And I said, look here, if people's voice is the government, I would kick you out of the country. I would terminate your employment pass. I'll kick you out of the country. All right? And you know what? You had these some people, these so-called intellectuals, all right, a famous blogger, quite a well-known civil activist, come and accuse me of fomenting fear, fomenting hatred, and said I was an irresponsible politician. Can you believe these people? I called these people dyed-in-the-wool liberals, all right? These are the people who will go about saying that it is wonderful for us to have immigrants. These are the people who will not mind if Singaporeans are losing jobs to immigrants, all right? Or to foreigners. I won't even call immigrants, because immigrants, after a while, if they become Singaporeans, yeah, they are part of us, all right? We have to accept that they are part of us, yeah? And these are the people who will throw up a big tantrum when any untoward act is done to a foreigner. For example, in the recent foreign workers' dormitories, they will kick up a big hoo-ha. I'm not excusing our Ministry of Manpower. I will never excuse Josephine Teo for that. I think she did a dreadful job. She is singularly the person who has condemned us to being described as one of the greatest failures for COVID. Totally inexcusable there. All right? But hey, these dyed-in-the-wool liberals, at the same time, when I call out a foreigner for having insulted and abused Singaporeans, say that I have no right to do so, that I am spreading fear, all right? I say, wake up your facts, all right? Wake up, yeah? Do you think that you can go to a foreign country? If I were to go to England or I were to go to Australia, I call their people racist and all that, you think I'm not going to suffer consequences? And I think it's high time for Singaporeans to stand up. Because you know what is our problem? For too long, we have accepted this narrative of the foreign talent. We have allowed our government to talk down to us. All right? And that is why I don't use the phrase foreign talent anymore today. I use the phrase Singapore talent. Any foreigner who works in Singapore is a foreigner who has come to work in our country, is a guest of our country. All right? This country is not their homeland. They abide by our rules. Just like if you were to go overseas to work in a foreign country, you jolly well abide by their rules. They have no right to come and tell us that we are racist, we are xenophobic, yeah? And they have no right to desecrate the name of our country. And you know something? These are the dyed-in-the-wool liberals who say that, oh, PV, People's Voice, is not here to represent Singaporeans. They have a different agenda. Yeah, these are the people who only want a certain type of opposition in Parliament. They are very happy supporting a certain type of opposition. All right? But you know what? Their opposition are those who sit on committees and do not ask a single question. You know? I think I would be remiss in my duty as a member of Parliament if I were to sit through an entire committee hearing without asking a single question. Yeah? So I tell these people, look at the substance of opposition and not at the form of opposition. And Singapore is fast changing. We will soon have multi-party democracy in which there will be great contestation amongst various parties for votes. And I foresee that in the near future, we are going to have coalition governments like what many other countries in the world are already experiencing. To insist on a two-party system is totally irrelevant and unfathomable. It is not practical because two parties cannot represent the wide spectrum of views in our society. You cannot say that 100% of Singaporean voters will fall into either the PAP or the WP camp or the PSP camp. There will be voters who want other representation. Who are you to decide that other parties have no right to be in the political arena? Who are you? All right? And you know what? One of them, all right? And I can tell you, one of them, during the COVID period, when the PAP was giving these handouts, he wrote a post. Oh, end of story. Opposition are going to be totally wiped out. That was his post, basically. All right? And of course, we know that wasn't what happened. In this election, the PAP basically lost. All right? It was a humiliating general elections for them. So why am I listening to this dyed-in-the-wool, so-called intellectual, pontificating on nonsense? All right? Yeah? I will always stand up for Singapore and for Singaporeans. I will always want to ensure that the best jobs go to Singaporeans. And I make no apology for that, even if I say, if PV was the government, I would kick out that foreigner who insults Singaporeans and insults my country. On that note, my friends, I'm going to end my talk to you, and I'm going to look at a few questions, and I shall answer them to the best of my abilities. Thank you. Now, Ziputin Kim, you said, do you see the Singapore police force, the AGC, the district judge will be sanctioned for whatever remiss that involved the injustice in the Liu Manyong case at hand. Well, Lim Tean, let me say this. Shanmugam has said that he's going to make a statement in Parliament, right? I see that there has been no date yet fixed for when the next sitting of Parliament will be. You know, Parliament last sat at the beginning of September. So, you know, our Parliament sits so infrequently, it has become a joke. All right? We are now coming to the end of September. He said Parliament at the next sitting, which will be next month, which should be in October. So what dates in October are they going to fix for him to make a statement to Parliament? Up to now, no news. He says that the various agencies were reviewing the case and he will make a statement to Parliament. He should, because there has been a lot of disquiet in this case. All right? And as for sanctions, well, Party Liani has been off the mark. She has brought disciplinary proceedings against two of the prosecutors in her case. And we will see what the court says. And I understand that she has also said through her lawyer that civil proceedings may be contemplated, you know. So, yes, I do not want to prejudge everything except to say that Party Liani seems to be the only one who has moved at this time, all right, to secure justice for herself. And I think Shanmugam has the duty to tell the Singapore people what changes need to be made in the Singapore police force and in the AGC so that justice can be better served and the Party Liani case is never repeated. And I think Singaporeans also want appropriate sanctions to be meted out. Yeah, so let's see what the minister says. Okay? Phoebe Haley Fu, you say, yes, I can't believe this kind of thing is happening in our country today. I start to lose faith in the leadership and doubt the transparency of this country. Phoebe, when, you know, Singaporeans and people all over the world, we have an innate sense of justice. And when a Party Liani case emerges, we are all infuriated, aren't we? Because isn't it the story of how the rich and the powerful have gamed the system, played the system to their advantage, to suppress a lowly, poorly paid Indonesian maid? And I don't care how rich or how poor you are, you have a sense of justice in you, and you know innately that something has gone wrong. And when that happens, you then look around at the circumstances and you then start to say, yeah, that is not right. You know, the prosecution was out for a kill, and the prosecution here is the government, or is so linked to the government, which is why I said right at the start of my talk this evening, it is important for us to have that separation. Yeah. We must eventually have something similar to the Crown Prosecution Service in England, or the system they have in Australia, which I think is a fabulous system, where the prosecution is basically taken out of the hands of the government or a government-linked agency. You can't tell me now that the AGC is not linked to government, when the AGC is the chief government legal advisor. The perception is there that it is linked to government. All right? Yeah. And, you know, I think the problem we have in this country is that we often talk in terms of theory. Oh, the AG, he's supposed to be independent when he institutes prosecutions. Yeah. I mean, how do you have these Chinese walls or these firewalls? It is physically impossible. Okay? All right? And we know human nature, don't we? We know that we are always likely to favor our own kind. All right? We are most likely to favor our own children over others, or our own relatives over others. And how do we prevent difficulties like that? It is when you institute a system, when you have independent institutions that can evaluate the evidence and then make a decision whether a prosecution should be undertaken. Yeah? And I say this also for other things. You know, the last few weeks, I made a post in which I said, we cannot have a system where it is left up to the minister to declare whether something is in conflict. You know, we have had this problem now for years, my friends. Yeah, spouses of ministers, being in very responsible positions in other state institutions. And how do you stop the chatter? Oh, she's linked to him, or he's linked to her. All right? Yeah, how do you stop that? And of course, you know, people, again, innately, all right? You know it when you see it. You know that there's a conflict. And yet you have these ministers stand up in parliament trying to convince you that, oh, the government doesn't see a conflict. We are not 3-year-olds, okay? All right, we are not 3-year-olds, all right? So I have suggested that Singapore must have a body like what they have in Canada. It is a body under Parliament. It is known as the Conflicts of Interest Office. And there is a commissioner there. He reports to no one except Parliament. And he determines whether a situation has attracted conflict or not. We need to take this out of the executive. We need to take this out of the hands of the ministers. They cannot be the judge. The problem in this country is that we have empowered the ministers with too much. You look at POFMA. It is so ridiculous. Yeah? They have now become the arbiters of truth. And you know what has become of POFMA? You know, Shanmugam told us that, oh, all disputes can be solved very quickly and very inexpensively. We had the SDP case and the TOC case, which has now gone to the Court of Appeal. You know how long it has taken to go to the Court of Appeal now? It has taken almost a year, if not more than a year. And you think that when you go to the Court of Appeal, you don't have to pay lawyers? Unless you want to undertake that whole process yourself, which very few lay people are capable of. So don't come and tell me that this is a quick process to resolve disputes or an inexpensive process. All right? So let's have independent bodies determine all this. Okay, I'm going to take two final ones. I'm going to Muhammad Hali Rizkin, you have said, any foreigners must follow and respect the culture and traditions of the country that they are in, whether or not it is a small or a big country, not the opposite. Totally agree. Totally agree. And so what is wrong with me calling out this person, this Amit Verma person, all right, which those dyed-in-the-wool intellectuals or pretentious intellectuals want to tell me I am not entitled to do. So if someone insults my country and my people, I'm supposed to keep quiet. Yeah? Yeah, other politicians may do so. I happen to be one of two politicians who have called out this person. Yeah? All right? I don't believe in all this notion of, pretending to be moderate, my friends. All right? I think this is a situation where there cannot be any political correctness. And if there is, the political correctness is to call out that person. Yeah? Like I was the one who, at the start of the COVID saga, PV was the only party that dared to make any noise that this government was leading us down the wrong path, a disastrous path, when all the other political parties kept quiet. They wanted to present this front that they were unified. And what happened? April the 7th, the government makes a dramatic U-turn, and everything PV had said or advocated before, has come true. And you know what? 9 months down the line, or almost 9 months down the line, Singaporeans are going through the worst consequences of COVID. Yes, the numbers may have come down, but the economic consequences are just dreadful. Dreadful. And we are not even seeing the end of it. In fact, we are only at the beginning. You know, if we had a government that had the wherewithal to make good judgment calls, had listened to PV, had closed our borders, all right, had mandated social distancing, safe distancing, the wearing of masks at the beginning of February, we would have been out of this mess by the end of February, early March. Thousands of businesses would have been saved. Yeah? Today, thousands of businesses have closed. Thousands have lost their jobs. You know? Government aid, meager as it was, is about to end. And we are in for the long haul, I'm afraid. Yeah? So, and that is why, my friends, I say, I'm not interested in the form of opposition. I'm not interested in sitting pretty in Parliament, you know, being an opposition member. All right? I'm not interested in that. I can do other better things with my life. Yeah? I came into opposition because I see a lot of wrong in our society. And I want to correct that. I want to see the rawness and the meat, the substance of opposition. I'm not interested in the form. All right? If you are interested in someone who wants to play along with the PAP, make beautiful speeches in Parliament, all right, can even advocate a lot of policies which don't have a hope in hell of being implemented, I say don't waste your time. Okay? All right? Finally, Teo Kwei Liang, who asked this question: could we go to Australia, USA, or England to work, but then address the citizens of these hosting countries xenophobic, don't respect and abide their rules and laws? These are vital but far-reaching questions that come to our mind and attention. Precisely. You know, Kwei Liang, I thank you for that comment. And I think that is how the great majority of Singaporeans feel. All right? And I tell you, my friends, do not allow those people to frighten you. You know, these people, they all use the same catchphrases: racism, xenophobia, all right, nativism, all right, nationalism. I say, you call me whatever you want. All right? I am interested in protecting the rights of Singaporeans. That is why I tell you globalization has become such a big failure. You know what the globalists believe in? They believe in not just the free movement of goods. They believe in the free movement of people. Yeah? That is what they believe in. And what has that resulted in? That has resulted in the top 1% becoming ultra rich, because they are the ones who move capital all over the world. You think the rich do business, the rich Singaporeans do business only in Singapore? No, they move their capital around. They invest in the US, they invest in Europe, they invest in China, in Australia. They employ people overseas, they manufacture overseas. All right? But very little of that benefit flows back to Singapore. You know, flows back to Singaporeans. You think when the GLCs invest in India because of the entitlements they have under SECA, you think that benefit actually flows back to Singapore and to Singapore workers? No. Or very little of it. If the business does well there, they employ more Indians, yeah, for their Indian entities. Yeah. That is how it works. And so I say, don't be fooled by all this notion of free trade. We should be asking ourselves, yes, we want to be open to the world, we want to trade with the world, but ultimately the question is this fair trade? Not free trade, is this fair trade? Does this benefit Singaporeans and the Singapore worker? Does this benefit 100% of Singaporeans and not just the 1%? That is the question we should be asking. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 6:30 now, coming to 6:30. I'm going to end here. I would like these sessions to be 1 hour. You know, we have so much more grounds to cover, but, you know, time does not permit us to. I know all of you are busy. All of you are probably going back home for dinner and all that. And I think this is an appropriate hour and an appropriate time to end. So thank you very much. And I hope to do another show next week. Okay? Thank you. And I hope you have found this useful.